Hello, my name is Eric Sauder from TeamAg, and I will be presenting today on accelerating the adoption of regenerative agriculture. So I'll bring the slides up for that now. So TeamAg is a company whose mission is to help farmers improve their environmental and economic performance. We have services across engineering and land planning, crop consulting, and agricultural planning and permitting. A really large portion of our work is conservation related, and the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay is one of our closest partners, so it's really exciting to be able to give this today. So the things that I'd like to cover today are first, what is regenerative agriculture? Then how agriculture, climate, and water are really, how they interact closely, especially through regenerative ag. And then I want to talk a little bit about regeneration economics and the things that are helping to accelerate the adoption of regenerative agriculture. So first, regenerative ag really is looking at the opportunity that we can be building soils, cleaning water, and increasing biodiversity through agricultural practices themselves. So for much of our recent history, we've been in a degenerative state where as time and production goes on, the ecosystem carrying capacity continues to go down. I don't have anything against sustainable ag at all, but you can think of a sustainable mode as kind of a constant carrying capacity, where regenerative ag is looking to actually build soils and improve biodiversity through the work that we're doing. So you might ask, how are we able to do that? And I'll bring up 5 of the core principles for soil health. So these begin first with keeping armor on the soil surface at all times. So you want to keep the soil protected. We're really familiar in the water community about controlling erosion from wind and water, but this also has other important features in that it reduces the evaporation rates, helps retain moisture for plants, and moderates soil temperatures, which keeps the soil food web happy, and also helps to suppress weed growth. Next, we want to limit disturbance. So this can be biological, that we're limiting overgrazing, or chemical, that we're applying too much nutrient and pesticide loads, or it could be from physical disturbance like tilling, and this is a picture of a no-till drill. Ultimately, tillage results in erosion, and you get a harder and harder crust on the soil, which causes ponding water and depletion of soil organic matter. Third, we always want to maintain living roots in the soil at all times. And so cover crops are a core example here. As a baseline, they keep the ground covered, but they do a lot more than that. A living root is always harvesting CO2 to feed carbon in the soil food web. It's building soil aggregates and pore spaces, which improve infiltration. And when we bring multi-species cover crops, they can be your ally here to break up compaction or capture and fix different nutrients. And they also help with the 4th one of bringing in diversity into the plant community. So this can come through diverse crop rotations, or also in multi-species planting. And really the core here, the core idea is that diverse soil biology comes from diverse plant communities. So it's hard to have one without the other. And then the 5th element here is integrating livestock whenever possible onto the landscape. It can help ease feed and manure management from a farmer's perspective, and manage weed pressure. But we're also seeing how cows on pasture, if managed well, can actually sequester carbon as well. As you are all aware, agriculture has many impacts on water quality. We see this through infiltration and runoff, sedimentation, and nitrogen, phosphorus issues. Chesapeake Bay is certainly an area of deep concern for this, and it's an area where I think regenerative ag is particularly important. Every 1% increase in organic matter results in 25,000 gallons of water being available for soil. So this is improving infiltration, but also improving crop yields for farmers. There's a man named Gabe Brown, who has been a real leader in the regenerative ag community, who has shown just how fast and how dramatic some of these changes have been to his soil organic matter and plant health. You can see the different practices that he implemented, from beginning with no-till to increasing the presence and diversity of cover crops, and then finally integrating more animals into his landscape. He's a Midwest rancher. And eventually here you're seeing him get to 11% organic matter, which is wild. And this is not in every way the same as soil organic carbon, but it is often related to soil organic carbon. So this is one of the places and ties where you really start to see regenerative ag conversations be connected to conversations about climate change. And we get to see articles like this from the New York Times in 2018 called "Can Dirt Save the Earth?" And so it's becoming much more mainstream now for people to be talking about the role of agriculture in climate. And I want to dive into that just a little bit. First, we see that climate has a lot of impacts on agriculture. So in this area, especially, we can expect heavier rainfall, increased annual rainfall amounts, increased temperatures, changes in what kinds of plants will grow where, and all of that adds up to increased economic risk for farmers. There's some really great resources like this from Cornell, where you can see how temperature and precipitation are anticipated to change by county, and how they have changed over the last 40 or so years. But this is all due to climate change. The basic science here is the greenhouse effect. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but as we change the composition of the atmosphere, it changes how much heat is captured from the sun, and we see a slow, a fairly rapid change in temperature over the last 100, 200 years of industrialization. So yes, there are cycles that we can see in ice core data through the past hundreds of thousands of years. Cycles are a normal thing. Where we are right now is far out of the normal cycling of temperatures and CO2 concentrations. And agriculture is certainly one of the core things to point a finger at for this. So depending how you count agriculture, depending how it's pulled apart from food production, it amounts to 10 to 20+% of our global greenhouse gas emissions, more if you're counting land use changes that are often tied to agriculture as well. But agriculture is a unique industry in that it's one of the only ones that could eliminate its emissions and become a net negative emitter. A lot of these ideas have come from Project Drawdown, which in 2016 categorized the top solutions for reversing global warming. Here's a bunch of them. There's a couple interesting takeaways from this. One, that there's no silver bullet to climate change. Another one that has been really important to me is that 12 of the top 20 solutions are related to land and food. So these are really core to what farmers control, what's happening in rural communities. And this has said to me that we can't be addressing climate change without working really closely with agricultural communities. And when they're engaged as part of the solution, I have found that they're often quite receptive to being in that position. As we're talking about climate and talking about water impacts of regenerative ag, wanted to spend a little bit of time here. I have seen that there are a number of different things that we are promoting for water reasons, and a number of different practices that we're promoting for climate reasons. I'm interested in that center element, and interested to see how the things that we're doing that are good for water can also have this climate impact as well, because it's not guaranteed, it's not always happening, and I'm happy to dive into that idea a bit more in the talkback portion of this. But there's opportunity for such deep alignment between water and climate that, especially in a place like the Chesapeake Bay, I think it's a really important opportunity for us to focus on. Back to the climate world for a moment. This is from Indigo Ag, which is one of the big companies that's pulling together different ecosystem service contributions. There's a question out there about whether farmers and ranchers can pull 1 trillion tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which is essentially the amount that we've emitted since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And a number of researchers that say, yes, it's possible that agriculture itself could store all of the carbon that we've emitted. And not to say that that's the best way to do it, but it is really interesting. And if we're not doing it through photosynthesis, it's going to look more and more like this. This is a direct air capture array from a company called Climeworks. It's basically mechanical photosynthesis. We have way overshot the amount of CO2 in the air. We need to draw it down. It's going to happen in some combination of these different ways. I think we need to figure out how to do direct air capture, but think how much easier it is to be growing plants and doing that well. So I just like to include that for perspective. I also want to say that this is something that that the agricultural industry is embracing too. This is from U.S. Dairy, which pledged on Earth Day a year ago to be carbon neutral by 2050, which is wild and incredible. And we've been in conversations with them about the work that we're doing with farms to help make this happen. And it's really exciting to see these types of visions come forward. Into the regenerative economics realm, I want to focus on 3 different things. First, ecosystem services, transition finance, and then finally, product premiums. So in ecosystem services, we're seeing new markets start to emerge for carbon credits, especially. That's the one that people are really paying attention to. I mentioned Indigo Ag earlier. Nori is another one that are showing how we can help farmers to become suppliers of these types of carbon credits, to sell them on the Nori marketplace to individuals and companies that want to offset their emissions, and see that those transactions are all verified and legit. There's a bunch of different companies that are emerging to do this. We're seeing Wall Street move in a pretty big way toward carbon credits, which is interesting and has some challenges that I'll talk about in a moment. And a lot of that is powered by commitments like this, where last year Microsoft pledged to be carbon negative. So many companies are saying we will be carbon neutral and cancel out our emissions. Others like Microsoft are saying we'll do that. We'll be carbon neutral from our operations standpoint. And then we're looking to remove all of the carbon that we've emitted through time. Companies and pledges like this have been really important in fostering this early stage industry. Why I wanted to talk about this is to look at some of the places where this is going to be really focused first. This is just above, or just north and east of Ames, Iowa. This is from Indigo's tool recognizing cover crop adoption. So all the gray fields here are fields that are not cover cropping. There's a couple lonely people that have been cover cropping out here. These huge acreages that have like 5% adoption of cover cropping and no-till really are the focus area for where these industries are emerging. It gets a bit more complicated in the Chesapeake as we're learning, because of the high rates of no-till and cover cropping here. We have additionality challenges. We want to see that when a company's paying to do this carbon sequestration, that is not something that's already happening. And so there's often requirements that you have to have begun or just now, or some have a reach back period of 5 or so years that are when you began these practices. So this is causing some challenges among farms that have been doing practices like this for decades, 40 plus years. We also see that there's a lot of different ways that you can improve from where they are now to keep storing more carbon in soils. So it's not only these kind of intro level soil health practices that are the only things that have value. There are tools like USDA's Comet Farm that if you can show how this practice is sequestering carbon, that it is an additional thing, and therefore can be valued for carbon offsets. But also the small complex field geographies here in the Chesapeake Bay are harder and costlier to verify, because a farmer might have 100 plus fields here that are all 5 acres compared to these massive several hundred acre fields that have very simple management in comparison out west. So there are some other things that are happening. Other organizations, one is called Regen Network, that are looking at a much broader array of practices and ecosystem services that we could measure and monitor and begin to stack together. Regen is taking this really holistic look at a change of state from an initial state to a final or current state, and being able to measure performance across all these different metrics, and create ecological contracts to show that change of state has happened and be able to pay for it. There's other organizations like the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium that have shown interest in moving their methodologies into the Chesapeake Bay as well, that are really exciting because of the possibility of stacking here. I think the important way to overcome some of the challenges with additionality are really to bring water, biodiversity, and carbon together as things that we're really monitoring and looking to care about in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It will allow us to build off of the progress that many farmers have already made with water quality, but also looking to deepen that into carbon and seeing that that biodiversity and life continues to increase in these farms as well. So some of the other things that are really important in this realm are the availability of different transition finance tools to help farmers move into regenerative ag. One example that we've gotten to work with has been called the Perennial Fund from a group called Mad Ag out in Boulder, Colorado. They've recognized that, especially when you're converting to organic or regenerative organic, there is a transitional time period of 3 years that you need transitional capital to make it across, but that revenues are often higher at the end of that. So they're offering loans to help farmers get to that final state paid back through profit share. It's a really awesome model for how they're looking to do that. The final way that finances get really important in transitioning to agricultural, to regenerative ag, is through product premiums. We have gotten to work closely with a company called Origin Milk in some of this, that's developing markets for regenerative A2 Guernsey, all pastured grass-fed milk. They are offering a premium that's pretty steep compared to the PA average for dairy. Of course, grass-fed it is not exactly an apples to oranges or apples to apples comparison to confined dairy. However, this is still at $40 per hundredweight. This is still a really significant premium to other grass-fed operations. And so this is a really interesting project where TeamAg is working alongside PASA and Origin Milk, Effort and National Bank and Rodale, and the Center for Dairy Excellence to help provide the tools and resources that farms need to convert from conventional or organic or grass-fed to being all of those together, to be regenerative, grass-fed, organic operations. So this is an exciting project because it's a glimpse of what it can look like for a company that has established markets to come in and help a fairly large number. They're looking to convert 200 plus farms over the next 3 years, and where we could see that have a transformative financial impact for the resilience of agricultural communities. And so I get excited about other potential brands and products that could help to bring this kind of regenerative premium revenue to farmers in the Chesapeake Bay region. So these are a number of brands that are associated with Savory's Land to Marketplace, which is another one of the marketplaces emerging, as is Patagonia Provisions. So these types of different markets and platforms are coming forward to offer this premium. It's going to be really interesting to see where that goes and what happens with them. And I don't think you can build an entire agricultural transition on the back of a premium, but you can get started in really exciting ways. And I think in many ways, this is valuing an agricultural product financially in the way that all agricultural products should be valued, and would allow farmers to really meet higher ecological standards, as well as being able to survive economically. So I'm excited about what's emerging in that regenerative product space. So we caught a glimpse of it there. I mentioned the regenerative organic certification a couple times. There's a new certification realm that's emerging with this as well. The ROC certification is coming out of Rodale, which was really the center for where organic originated. Now they're taking that idea a step farther to this regenerative organic certification, which prioritizes soil health, animal welfare, and farm worker fairness as well. They designed this to be a grouping of all of these different priorities together. It's still an interesting landscape where a bunch of different certifications are emerging, and that has by no means settled down. But it's an exciting time to see how these will emerge and how we'll be able to both give people buying food confidence in what they're buying, and also strong premiums that farmers can count on to shift into new markets. So to help farmers to be able to make those decisions and understand what it would look like, we've been developing different tools at TeamAg to help farmers develop these regenerative farm systems plans. And this really began by asking questions about how we benchmark farms across their soil health, crop and animal management, water quality, biodiversity, and emissions, identify opportunities for them, know the different costs and how this might work, and then access new markets. One of the things about regeneration for farms is that by improving soil health, you're often removing different inputs and different costs and energy use to make that farm work. So you're able to decrease your costs of operation and also add new revenue streams, and hopefully also access premium pricing as well. There've been a number of different funded projects that we've gotten to work through to help grow this out from the Pennsylvania Department of Ag and PA-NRCS, and also I mentioned the NIFWF INSR project with PASA and Rodale. So these have been really exciting projects for us to get to work on, to be doing this planning work for farms and exploring the different opportunities that farmers can access, especially in the realm of ecosystem service marketplaces. Just to give you a glimpse of what the kind of typical savings could look like for farms, for a small Lancaster 100-acre farm, as we're adopting no-till and cover cropping crop rotations, we could expect this kind of sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus reductions, but then also this carbon drawdown, which looks like the emissions from 20 homes. To just give you a bit of a perspective there of what 163 tons of CO2 looks like and what that means. So a few closing thoughts before we get to questions and conversation. There's deep alignment between agriculture and conservation, and I think we see that most in regenerative ag. There are many new opportunities that are emerging right now, especially in the ecosystem service realm in premium markets. But regeneration has real financial impacts for farmers. And it's not just the ecosystem service credits and other things that should probably be treated like icing on the cake, but that it has real importance for costs of inputs and management as well. So as people who are deeply connected to the water conservation community and realm, I would encourage you to pay attention to different in-field BMPs, as well as things that are happening right along a stream, because this is a place where a lot of interesting stuff with climate impact can happen. And even if it's upland, if we're keeping sediment and nutrients in place there, they're not getting to streams. So I'll always advocate for that. But I also want to help you to think back to that slide about what is good for climate and what is good for water, and what is good for both. And to advocate for climate as a potential additional gateway for people to be doing work that has real water outcomes as well, but also making sure that we don't miss the possibility for climate outcomes in stuff that's already happening that's good for water. And then finally, continue to be aware of how ecosystem service marketplaces are emerging. We talked about some of the reasons why they will be a bit different in the Chesapeake, but also this idea of stacking carbon, water, and biodiversity. It can be something that makes the Chesapeake Bay area a real leader, and I would encourage us to work on advancing that as a part that makes us really unique. So thank you very much. I will see you virtually here for some questions. If you'd like to get in contact with me, here's my email and phone number. But thank you very much for your attention.